In this video, we lay the fundamental distinction between objects, functions, and assignments, and we will thereby learn about some concepts that you will use all the time when you're doing data science using R. Now, here's a quote that helped me a lot in understanding of how actually R works in practice. It's the following. To understand computations in R, two slogans are helpful. Everything that exists is an object, and everything that happens is a function call. This is really helpful, although it might seem to be a bit abstract in the very first place. This statement tells us that like every number, every function, every letter, every table or whatever there is in R is an object that is stored somewhere in the physical memory of your computer. Like everything. If you have a number 2, it's an object and it is stored somewhere on your computer. And it doesn't matter whether it's a number 2 or a very complex table with a lot of numbers in there. Now, whenever we do something in the sense that we ask the computer to effectuate a computation, or whether we want to do an addition or subtraction, etc., what you're effectively doing is calling a function. So whenever something is done in R, a function is involved. That means that the operation 2 plus 3, which we considered before, refers to essentially 3 objects. Which are these objects? It's obviously the number 2, the number 3, and the function plus. That means also a function is an object. That's very important to keep in mind. It's not only things like 2, 3, or strings or whatever, but it's also a function that is an object. Now, when we effectuate the operation 2 plus 3, we are actually doing something. We're adding up numbers. And that already gives us a hint that a function is involved. And the function in this case is the function addition. The code then obviously executes the addition function and produces a further object, the number 5. So once this operation actually gets effectuated, another object emerges, and that is the result of this computation, namely the number 5. Now, these computations like 2 plus 3, we do basically all the time. And you've already seen in the example before that if you effectuate them in the console, the result is printed to you, but it's not kept somewhere. So it's actually difficult to access. So in this case here, you get the result from 2 plus 3, the 5. But the thing is that this result, the number 5, it's an object that has been created, and it is on your computer. It is stored somewhere, but you don't know where. And that's problematic because you can't use it for further computations. Often you want to chain computation. So you want to compute something and do something with the result. And in this case, you can't do it because you're not able to find the result 5 on your computer. Of course, you could tell the computer about the precise location on the hard drive where to find it, but that's impossible to process and to remember. So a much easier way to deal with this problem is to give the result a name. And by giving the result, the 5 in this case, a name, we can later call this result basically by calling its name. And this process of taking an object and binding a name to it, this process is called assignment. And it is actually effectuated by a function, which is logical because assigning a name to something means to do something, and as we heard from the quote, doing something in R always involves the call of a function. Now let's check out how we actually call this function that helps us to do an assignment, meaning to bind a name to an object that we then want to use for further reference. To this end, let's move again to RStudio. Here on the top you see the computation that we've been effectuating, so adding up the numbers 2 and 3. And here's again the problem. So we effectuate the computation, we get the result 5, but we can't access this result. So we want to assign a name to it. And we do this by the function called assign. If you write the name of a function, RStudio already gives you a suggestion of which function to use. In this case, you just press enter, and RStudio already helps you a little bit in how to use the function. We will learn more about how to use a function exactly later. For now, it's sufficient for you to know you need to write the name of the function. In this case, the name is assign. You need to open the brackets and then put in the so-called arguments of the function. In our case, this function actually takes 2 arguments. First of all, the name of the object that we want to bind to an object. This name needs to be given in quotes. So let's use the string intermediate result as a name, and we want to bind this name to the object which is the outcome from the computation 2 plus 3. If we now run this line of code, we see down here in the terminal that at first sight nothing happens, so there is no output produced. But you might have recognized that up here in the top right, in the environment, you now see that there is a correspondence table emerging with intermediate result and 5. That basically means that you now can type here the name we've given to the object before, and if we now press enter, R will actually show you the object to which we have bound this name. And since the name intermediate result is bound to the result of 2 plus 3, which is 5, whenever we type intermediate results, we basically can retrieve the result of the computation 2 plus 3. We can then further process this result. We could say, for example, intermediate result times 5, meaning essentially 5 times 5, and we get another result, 25. Now, this is extremely helpful if you want to chain basically more than one computation, or several computations one after another. There might be the case also that you actually want to get rid of assignments. In this case, you could use the function rm. If you call this function, then provide a name and you press enter, then you see here that the binding of the name to the object has been removed. You can then recreate it, obviously, by calling this function again. And you could also remove all the assignments by clicking on this button, button right here. Now, since assignment is something that you do very, very frequently in practice, there's also a shortcut that I actually recommend you to use all the time. So we could we could achieve the same that we did in line 3 by just writing intermediate result, and then this combination of symbols here, and then write 2 plus 3 on the right side of the assignment, so-called assignment operator. If we now execute this line, we again bind the name intermediate result to the result of the computation 2 plus 3. In the following, I will only use this assignment operator here. Using the function assign is something that you actually will seldom do in practice. Now, 2 things are memorable when it comes to assignments. First of all, you can assign an object many names. So, for example, we have already assigned the result of the computation 2 plus 3 the name intermediate result. There's nothing that stops us from creating another name, final result, and assign it the same object. Now, in this case, both final result and intermediate result point to the same object, namely 5. We could even do this more explicitly by writing final result and assign to it the intermediate, the object that has the name intermediate result. So all this works. But while one object can have many names, it can't be true that like a name points to more than one object. What happens if we take the object, the name final result, and now use another object to it, or refer to another object by this? If we execute this code, you actually see that the old assignment has simply been overwritten by the new one. I mean, that's pretty clear because you have a name, and the idea is that the name points to some location on your computer, and every name obviously can only point to one location at a time. So whenever you create a new assignment by using the same name but a different object, the new assignment will replace the older one. The second thing you need to keep in mind that while you can use basically every name out there, you can't exactly use every name. There are a couple of exceptions. So there are a number of rules for names. Like for instance, a couple of words are forbidden. For example, you can't use the name true. If we try to assign the name true to an object, we will get an error. That is just forbidden because true is important for a couple of other aspects. There are obviously some other rules for names that are forbidden, but that's actually most straightforward just to read up in the course tutorials. The only recommendation I can give you, use names that are somehow self-explanatory. Using names like, I don't know, foo22 are usually not very useful. Use names that somehow give you a hint to which kind of object they point. This actually makes it easier for you to understand your code and also to communicate this code to others. Aside from that, the essential message that you should take away from this video is actually what assignment means, how to effectuate it, and how it relates to this idea of objects and their names. In the next step, we will focus more on these two other subjects that I was mentioning in the beginning, namely objects and functions. And we will start by having a closer look at functions. We already learned about the function assign. In the following, we will focus on functions more generally, especially those functions that you are actually using frequently in practice.